Okay.
Okay, and if everybody's ready, we'll start in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Mystical Underground. Thank you for joining us. This is Rob McGregor
And Trish McGregor.
And our producer and tech magician, John Posey. You can go to themysticalunderground.com where we make regular blog posts and where you can find out about our books. Among them are Phenomena, Harnessing Your Psychic Abilities, The Secrets of Spirit Communication, Sensing the Future, and Aliens in the Backyard. Our most recent book is called The Shift, Reports from the Mystical Underground. Trish's latest novel is White Crows, and Rob's long-awaited 7th Indiana Jones novel, The Staff of Kings, is available in ebook and audio.
Okay, our guest today is Alexis Brooks. Alexis is an award-winning broadcast journalist and host of the podcast Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. She's the author of Conscious Musings. A veteran of broadcast journalism since 1986, Alexis was simultaneously pursuing a track that would lead her to an intensive study of metaphysical, spiritual, and consciousness-related subjects, areas of inquiry that stem from her own extraordinary encounters that began as a child. Alexis has also become recognized for her work within the field of ufology, with emphasis on the ET Contact Experiencer Report. Yay, Alexis, you're here.
Welcome,
Yay,
Alexis.
among friends. It's a great thing.
Right.
How are you guys doing? I love being with you.
Yeah. So
I have a question right off the bat for her about your childhood encounters. I thought, wait a minute, I don't remember hearing about this.
Childhood encounters? Oh God.
Yeah.
With all the time that we have spent in discussion, Trish, you mean to tell me I've never dropped that on you?
No, you've told me, but you never gave me the details.
You know,
like I didn't know your age.
Yeah. Look, I think like so many others, so many other individuals, childhood encounters are not atypical. You know, many let's go to the whole imaginary friend thing that happens to so many children. And invariably you've got parents or, mothers, fathers saying, oh, you're just imagining things. There's no imaginary friend. And yet, we hear account after account of individuals who are giving, as children, explicit detail, not only on quote imaginary friends, but describing a grandmother or grandfather that they hadn't even seen when they hadn't been born yet. So I just want to set the record straight that I don't think this is as much of an anomaly as one might think. But as for me, Trish and Rob, I've been asked this question before, and I'm not going to say that my encounters were really way out there and all the time, but I had a proclivity toward precognition, as an example. Premonition, precognition, they may be considered slightly different, but related. And as a child, I would say more as an adolescent and going into young adulthood, I would have a cavalcade of these incidents that would happen invariably before they would actually materialize, but they would materialize. So that would, I would say, be sort of a baseline for the type of phenomena that I was experiencing. Now, in terms of interacting with other beings, as an example, I'm still trying to uncover what I think are probably unconscious memories that some kind of interaction was taking place. There's one I can tell you. I cannot nail the time nor my age. I can say it was before I was 13 because I recall that we had still lived in the Boston area, Boston proper. And I have a very blurry memory of being visited by what is classically referred to as a shadow person. Now, I did not know that term. Most people still don't, that are visited by them. And yet, as I became a researcher later on in life and started looking at some of the hallmarks associated with the classic shadow being, not the least of which is a shadow in one's doorway, as an example, I would start to uncover memory, or I have been starting to uncover a really, really vague memory of being visited by what appeared to be a man, short hair, black face, in a dashiki, an African dashiki. The truth. I would never recall the features of the face, but I remember this being coming to me, hovering over me, all of the things that we classically hear in a shadow being visit. And I'll tell you, you probably recall our late colleague, Rosemary Ellen Guiley. I miss her so much, who did stellar work in this area on what is the shadow being phenomenon. And moreover, is it related to the jinn? And it was working with her, probably at this point, a decade ago, that I had an epiphany one day. I think I was preparing to interview her on my show. And I triggered, the incident came back to me. And I thought, oh my God, this fits the hallmark of a shadow person account. And there are variations of it. So that's one that I can say as a child, teen, that I believe happened to me. Another, I will say.
Let me just interrupt a second here. Couldn't that possibly have been like an ancestral visitation as well?
Could have been.
Because of the dress? Yeah.
Could have been. Well, I've got like so many of us, we're mutts. We're mixed with so many different things. Native American is also a part of my heritage. My mother actually believed herself to be visited by a Native American at one point, and that's another story for another time. But yeah, it could be. We don't know. This is the thing, when we look at all of these interactions that individuals are having by certain types of entities, beings, or even other humans in the non-corporeal state, we have to ask the question, what is the association with me, the person that's having the experience, and who I'm being visited by? So that's a good question. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a keynote speaker for Contact in the Desert coming up June 2nd to 4th. Tell us about that.
So excited for I'm sure your audience is at least in part aware of Contact in the Desert. It's billed as, I think they bill it as the Woodstock, the Woodstock of UFO conferences.
Right. Yeah.
It's been going on for a long time. And of course, because of the pandemic, it hasn't been live for 4 years. So we're all really excited to be back on board, not virtually, but in real life. And yes, I'm really excited that for the first time I have been asked to give a full lecture as well as a workshop, the lecture on the 2nd, and I'll be doing a really fun interactive workshop on the 4th. So just really excited to be with all my friends and buddies. Wish you guys are going to be there. We're going to be there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll come next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll be, as I said, doing more of a lengthy presentation on Friday the 2nd, having to do with unconscious contact. Are you an experiencer and don't know it? This has been a theme that I have been kind of chipping away at for, I would say, at least 5-6 years. I thought, as researchers, and I know you both know, you're always pondering what's possible, what's really going on here, what is the nature of reality, and what are the clues to this idea that we may be in contact with non-human intelligence? And so this is an idea that I started developing a theory around, that that contact may be far more ubiquitous, far more mainstream, widespread than we know, crossing all sorts of cultures, religions, historical periods, and perhaps the most unsuspecting of individuals. We're talking as an example, forgive me, the guys and the gals that want to watch football and drink beer and watch Netflix and do nothing else. That's all fine. But what if they're experiencers too? And if so, how might we chip away at that and look at some clues as to where contact may be happening? So it's a pretty deep dive, the presentation. Yeah.
Do you think these alien contact or abductions are random experiences, or are certain people targeted?
That's a really deep question, Rob. I don't think anything is random. I'll start with that. I don't think anything is random. I mean, our understanding of the universe. I always say universe finds a way to act on purpose, but it seems to be so convoluted as to how we understand what that purpose is. So as far as randomness, no, I don't think it's random. The question is, if it's not random, then what is it, and why are certain people targeted? But remember, in my thesis of unconscious contact, what I'm postulating is that if it's a ubiquitous phenomenon, then no one's targeted. Everybody may be having some form of contact. The question then becomes, why is it that some people become aware of it and get really entrenched in the experience of it, where others are completely oblivious to it? Again, I'm talking about individuals that are doing anything but listening to podcasts like this or mine.
Uh-huh.
Maybe they're watching Ancient Aliens. That's the other thing. You're seeing a lot more interest in the subject. This has been going on for a while.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
guys know this as
Yeah.
researchers. So could we be living at a time where there's some triggers going on? Consciousness is expanding and people are starting to ask bigger questions. And as they go down their own process, maybe discovering something else is going on here. I think I may be having contact.
And I think one of
Yeah,
the things
people like Whitley, for one thing, you know,
Yeah.
he really delved into his experience.
Absolutely.
Experiences.
Yeah. Well, Whitley is the gold standard, I think, when it comes to
Yeah.
the phenomenon. And yet, and you know, I think we need to be so careful when we're even pondering such a thing, because we tend to want to fit into a certain criteria as to how contact happens. But in my research, it seems that there are so many entry points, which is what I'm going to be going into in the lecture. Entry points that have to do with strange phobias. We can talk about that if you like, to childhood trauma. And I mean human-caused childhood trauma as one mechanism by which contact may be more likely for some people. So yeah, it's pretty deep, pretty heavy.
What about the aspect of these contacts being multi-generational? That seems to be a factor that is coming out more.
You know, I have been looking at this aspect, one of the many curious aspects to the phenomenon, intergenerational contact, and what I find myself doing, because, you know, I have no problem talking to people on the street. Hey, I'm a researcher, not quite like that. I'm a researcher in the UFO field. I find myself getting into deep conversation with the average person about these sorts of things, and invariably they will have a story to share with me. And on many occasions, I've had the opportunity to ask, hey, is this something that is in your family, your mother, father, whatever? And you guys, more times than not, the answer is yes. So I think that there is, it's not to say that contact is happening exclusively intergenerationally, and yet there seems to be some sort of legacy that can go back generations. In fact, not only on one side, maternal, but paternal as well. So then you go down the rabbit hole of, well, I wonder if, you know, a man and wife is an example, a man and woman coming together, could that be orchestrated because they both come from a lineage of contact and therefore will have offspring? So there's like a common thread, it seems, throughout all of this. It's really fascinating.
You know, we met a couple on this cruise we went on who they got married and neither one of them knew before that they had both been abducted at some point. So she definitely felt that it was the abduction that had pretty much brought them together.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. Yeah. I'm smiling about that now because, as you all know, well, I know you guys know that I recently relocated to South Carolina from the Boston area. And you know me, I love to talk. I've been meeting the neighbors. They're all great. And neighbors right next door to me, you guys, told them what I do. You know, this happens, I'm sure, to you guys all. What do you do? Journalist. In what field? Okay. Both of them are abductees. Both of the husband and wife right next door. I'm looking at their house right there. Yes, absolutely.
That's funny.
Now, like years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, I read that research that suggested that about 25 million people worldwide had acknowledged abduction experiences. Those are just the ones that know about it. So
that's right.
If that's true, how many others do not know about it?
That's the question. That is the question. And so the real question becomes, well, why is that? Why is it that some people are made to know or to become conscious of their contact and others that may never know consciously? And that's a question I certainly can't answer. But I do. Here's what I found in my research in the last several years, at least, is that for whatever reason, there seems to be trigger points that are happening to people right now. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, look at what we've just been through, people being forced to be isolated and being forced with their own thoughts and their own consciousness. That would be one, to ponder these big things. You know, there was actually some research done. I can't cite the organization, but during the pandemic, maybe even on the back end of it, that more people were having UFO sightings during the lockdown period. Well, of course,
that's interesting.
Well, yeah, but the argument was, well, they've got more time to look up. That could very well be. But the inclination to look up, and once they do, perhaps having a sighting, and sightings in and of themselves can be triggers for contact. So you got a whole bunch of things kind of coalescing, coming together. And look, I think, again, universe acting on purpose and us living, I believe, at a very pivotal time, are the veils of separation thinning, the veils between how we live in this world and all that exists outside of it coming together, which includes our own consciousness about our connection to the wider world. That may include contact. So
well, that's what we wrote about in The Shift, that we're undergoing a paradigm shift, it seems, in consciousness.
Oh, no question about it. For better or worse. For better or worse. So yeah.
Yet there's some people who are like wearing blinders that aren't aware of it or don't want to be aware of it, of contact. Even like Trish and I had experience a couple of years ago where we had just gone to Barnes and Noble. We'd bought a book, alien abduction book I'd never seen before, and haven't seen it since, by the way, either, which is odd. And we walked outside in the parking lot, and there was this object in the sky right above us, hovering, maybe 300, 400, 500 feet, just like a bright light. And so there's people, we're standing there for 5-10 minutes watching it, and there's people walking by us. Nobody else looks up. It's so strange.
Yeah, it is.
It's like they don't want to know.
It's almost lack of curiosity, though, too. What are those people looking at? Well, I don't care.
Right. Well, because there were other people that were looking up, so it definitely caused. It could have caused a scene, but you're saying other people just didn't.
They just did not look up. I
think there are a lot of reasons for that. Dissonance could be one, but I think that people are also just so buried in their own stuff that
exactly,
they just don't care. There's a lot of things, but Rob, interesting you should bring that up, because how many times have we heard cases of people having a UFO sighting? Let's say they're in their car on the highway and they look around and notice that no one else is seeing it. And even cases of people that are maybe standing next to each other, where one person is seeing an object and the other not. And that, I think that's a little bit more of an exotic situation, if you will, because it begs the question, do these objects, assuming they are operated by some form of sentience, or maybe sentient themselves, have the ability to cloak themselves to certain people and be visible to others? And again, I think what we need to look at, I have no idea what the answer is, but it seems that they're able to do that, or some force is able to do that.
Yeah, it seems like contact is somewhat nebulous that way. It's not really necessarily three-dimensional.
I don't think it's three-dimensional at all. I think it can be, but it's not. That's not its origin.
Right.
Yeah. So it's so interesting times, and not to mention, this sort of mainstream buzz that's been going on. I think there've been different iterations or different news cycles of how the UFO/UAP phenomenon has come front and center because of different things, not the least of which is the so-called Chinese spy balloon, which, by the way, was over my house. I saw it. Saw the Chinese spy balloon over my house, and about 2 hours later, it was shot down off the coast of South Carolina. So,
God.
No, we saw.
Did it look like a balloon?
Yeah.
Did it really look like a balloon?
It did. It was pretty high up, but we could see it quite clearly. And of course, I ran and got my binoculars. It was actually the neighbors that are abductees or that had contact that rang my doorbell and said, "There's a UFO out there. Come on out." And so ran out, and I'm like, "You guys, I think that's the so-called surveillance balloon." Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But these news stories seem to beget coming back to this idea of, from a mainstream perspective, of visiting the very real possibility that UFOs/UAPs are real. I believe there's another congressional hearing that either just took place or is about to discuss more efforts on the part of the Pentagon to examine what's happening here, because more people are coming forward. So something's happening.
And it's all in the mainstream. It's all about the hardware. They don't get into who's behind the operation.
I don't think they want to. I don't think they
There-
want to. That's
well,
that they leave that to us, Rob. That's
yeah,
what we're
right.
here for.
The
Well, that's
speculators.
nice of them.
The
Yeah.
speculators.
We had one guest on the podcast, Dolly Saffron, who came on with Preston Dennett,
Yeah.
and she believes that aliens have left the universe because the planet is about to suffer through catastrophic climate change
Mm.
and will basically render the planet uninhabitable. So, has your research indicated something different
Well, you
than
know,
that?
Trish, I haven't really approached it from that perspective. I mean, look, we've had throughout the course of history, ancient history, all of these sort of foretellings of
Right.
of
Disasters and
disaster, of
End of the
apocalypse,
world. Yeah.
end of the
Yeah.
world, etc.
Right.
Yeah. But interesting that she should say that she feels that the beings, some of them have left the planet due to this. That I've never heard. Again, I don't know. Beings is what I say. What beings? Which beings? I think we're dealing with a spectrum. Well, I do.
Yeah,
I
I think so
really feel
too.
we're dealing with a spectrum of species, a spectrum of abilities, extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, interdimensional. There seems to be just a whole litany of intelligent life that's all around us, spirit beings. You know, where are those lines of demarcation? So if I mean, did she say what beings are leaving the planet?
Not specifically,
Well,
just the beings with which she's acquainted.
The Greys,
Right?
mainly.
The Greys.
Yeah. But she
I don't know if
sees
it was the Greys.
the little Greys are like robots to these larger ones that are more human-like. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Oh
what
God.
she
Yeah.
described it.
Well, you know, it's speculated that there may be a dozen or more different variations of the Greys. I've interviewed quite a few
Yeah.
individuals that believe to be have been contacted by the little Greys, and of course, the question has come up, or the assumption has come up that they may be more of a AI driven entity rather than a synthetic rather than organic. I don't know. I don't have any speculation about that, but I mean, look, there have been stories of the beings that are said to have shut down nuclear sites for fear of disaster to save the planet. I don't know how interested they are in saving us, but rather saving the resources that they must have some kind of hand in, it seems. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
We know.
Go ahead, Trish.
Well, I was going to say we met them for lunch, and Dolly and Preston in Blue Ridge, Georgia, and she just talked on and on about this. And she said within 2 years, she felt the food shortages were going to be so severe that from that point and eight years forward, that basically life was going to be a struggle for survival. And I thought, okay,
yeah, she's not the only one.
Mean?
She's not the only one talking about that. I mean, look, here's what I say as I think glass half full, tend to be a glass half full person. All of this could be possible, but I think the beauty of our reality is that it's so plastic and so flexible that it can change. It's just like going to a psychic and the psychic says something very, very ominous, let's say, something definitive is going to happen. Well, I don't know. Particularly if you are of the mindset of a holographic model of the universe, part of that model dictates fluidity and things never being set in stone, but the trajectory can be changed at any point in time, even though there may be a likelihood of a certain outcome. That's a very tricky thing. But I'm certainly not resigned to that as an ending. And even if there is some sort of ending as we understand it to be, I look at reality as cyclical. So it's just going to rebirth itself. It's too smart not to.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I'm sorry, just let me interject.
Go ahead.
Is that I do have to mention that as human beings, one of the reasons we're at the top of the food chain is we're very adaptable. So let's hope we can come up with the technology to get through whatever happens. So we've done pretty well so far. We'll see.
I think it's inner technology, John. I think that's what we're going to have to really.
Yeah, I think it is too.
The technology that's always been there. I know what you're talking about.
Yep. Well, we're adaptable in several ways, but
we are.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So internally but can kind of shape shape the environment around us, apparently as a plus if we are going through a severe climate event. But we'll see how it
Yeah.
works out.
Yeah. It's an exciting time. I say it's an exciting time. And the book that I wrote, I was just listening to another interview that I did where I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe that book was written, Conscious Musings, 5 years ago. It's 2014, almost 10 years now." But in the book, I have a chapter called Dichotomy of Consciousness and the Precipice of Change. And I muse about this idea that when we get to the point of dichotomy where all these really drastic but polar opposite things are happening at the same time, we're probably on the precipice of a change in trajectory. And I think we're seeing that play out right now.
Yeah, I think so too.
The worst, complete financial collapse, complete, earthly disasters, but also this consciousness expanding. And like you guys reference in your book, The Shift, that this is time for a not an end, a shift. Maybe we need these drastic things to happen in order to make a leap of evolution. So
so too.
Fascinating. Yeah. We have a hand in it too. We're, like you said, John, we're adaptable. And I believe our consciousness is a lot more capable of creating and destroying than we give ourselves credit for. So
go
ahead, Rob.
Okay, yeah. So one of the interesting things that Dolly talks about that I found fascinating is that she communicates with the craft itself. The craft is a conscious being. I don't know. It seems like it's more than AI. But she communicates telepathically with the craft. It has a name, and maybe that's the direction that we're heading with the expansion of AI. I know you have some ideas about AI, John, that may not be as terrible as some people think, but
well, let me just interject there, is that I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves, that we need to worry about the machines. I'm much more worried about the people that are programming the AI than the AI itself. So, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
Well, if I could just make a statement, Rob, not a statement, but a comment about your idea that this the woman that you recently interviewed has communicated with the craft itself. This is something that is not foreign to the ufology community conversation going on. The question is, are some, I have to preface, some of these craft actually sentient in and of themselves? And as a matter of fact, I've talked about this a couple of times on the History Channel. I don't know if your audience knows that I'm a cast member for the show. The Proof is Out There. We're going into our fourth season.
Show.
Yay. So excited. And I've covered a couple of stories on Proof about this idea of what is called UFO mitosis. UFO mitosis is essentially this idea of some craft having a cellular structure and are able to morph and split into smaller cellular structures. Well, when we're talking about the cells are alive. The cells are us. And ergo, they are sentient to an extent. So, many people, contactees as well as researchers, believe that some of these craft do have the ability, that they may not even be being operated by beings as we understand them to be. Rather, the craft are not only self-learning, but conscious in and of themselves. Yeah.
And there's been quite a few sightings that I've heard of where people are watching what seems to be a large craft, and suddenly it breaks apart into a number of pieces and shoots off into different directions. And
that's a mitosis. That would be indicative of what a mitosis is, because that's the way a cellular mitosis behaves that way, where it starts as sort of this one entity, but then in a way gives birth to, or replicates. It's self-replicating. Now, what's weird, where have we heard that self-replicating? In AI, in the AI conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a little creepy to me, actually, if it's AI driven. I don't know.
Well, Alexis, you mentioned these traumas. Describe some of the traumas that people suffer? Well, at least that you know about, the ones.
In the lecture, I touch upon the idea of a correlation between childhood, as an example, sexual abuse, not having anything to do with the beings, so to speak, but could individuals, and it's very sad that the statistics back when I was doing my initial research are very alarming in terms of, in fact, I think I have some notes here that talk about it, but oh gosh, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, it's said, will be sexually abused before the age of 18. Let's just start with that. That's stunning. When I was developing a talking point, I don't even want to say a thesis, but a talking point around this idea that could individuals that suffered childhood sexual abuse be more likely to have a contact encounter, and the reasons behind that, it was the late John Mack that actually researched this sexual trauma or even ritual abuse and contact as some kind of a connect point. And it's very unclear. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation where you don't know whether the initial childhood trauma somehow made the brain more receptive to these experiences, or under hypnosis, it's been discovered in some cases that people that thought they were having an abduction encounter, it turned out to be a childhood sexual encounter that they masked as an abduction encounter. But so it's very gray. Forgive the pun, very gray. Yeah, but that is something, I gave this lecture initially in Australia back in 2019. I can't believe.
I remember that.
Yeah. And you guys, I hit on a lot of points in this presentation. It's about an hour and a half, good 2 hours, but I only have 90 minutes. But when I got to this section, it struck a chord with a lot of people. That was the part. Now, I do go into phobias. I go into debunkers as possible experiencers. I go into, all sorts of things, including the intergenerational link. But when we got to the point of talking about how childhood trauma, and maybe it's not just sexual abuse. It could be someone who was incessantly beaten as a child.
Yeah,
there's trauma there. The brain is doing something to protect that child from the memory of that trauma, but maybe opening up vistas to allow otherworldly experiences to be more common. That is really what struck a chord with people, that part of the presentation. So there's still a lot of questions there. But there
was a woman in Aliens in the Backyard, Deborah, who had been, abused and not treated very nicely during her childhood. And she had all kinds of encounters, including she lost a pregnancy.
Yeah.
She
wow.
was pregnant.
Well, that's another thing, these things.
That's a whole nother subject. Yeah.
It's a whole other subject. And yet they all seem to be related. They all seem to be.
They are.
There's interrelatability into all these little nuggets of missing pregnancies, childhood trauma, et cetera, that have been linked to possible contact. And here's the other thing I want to stress. We think of contact with, I call non-human intelligence, because I think there's a range of them, as being one and the same as abduction. And I don't think that's the case, where all abduction is a form of contact. Not all contact is abduction. I mean, you've got a lot of experiencers that say, I was never abducted. This was an agreement that I somehow recalled having. And so I'm not being taken against my will. I'm interacting, but it's not an abduction. Abduction is associated more with being taken against your will and being forced to do things that are against your will. So I think that needs to be clear as well.
Yeah, I think the experiencer is a more neutral term that could go either way, really.
Oh, yeah. I
mean, about the intergenerational thing, look at Betty Hill's aunt. What's her, I can't remember her name.
Well, Kathleen Martin is the niece of Betty.
Yes, Kathleen Martin.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, the niece, that's right.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. She is, and she's gone on the record in great detail. Excuse me, on her own contact encounters, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. And we can take that, you guys, as an example. You have Betty and Barney Hill that were a married couple, and yet both of them had, allegedly, this fantastically bizarre encounter in New Hampshire. Could both Barney's side of the family and Betty's side of the family have had a lineage of contact encounters?
That's what I've wondered.
Right.
One of the things. Barney never mentioned that, I don't think, but it's possible, certainly.
It
Oh,
took
it's absolutely.
it took them for a while to come out in public about it because they were both involved in the civil rights movement, and
Yes.
they didn't want their to their status to be ruined by talking about alien encounters that and so they were slow to come out, but eventually
They had to, I think. Well,
yeah.
look, I mean, at the time, what are we talking about? This was the 60s, right?
Yeah, the 60s.
65, I want to say, somewhere in the mid 60s.
Yeah.
Never mind societal pressure on, coming out with something like that, but they were an interracial couple. I mean, that in and of itself, I'm sure they got plenty of flack, if you will, for taking that leap. But then you put that on top of it. I can't imagine the pressure that was felt. So yeah. Kathleen Martin, by the way, does amazing work working with experiencers both at MUFON and also she's done a lot of work with the FREE organization, which is now renamed the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, which is now another version of that, but the work is still going on. So
I really enjoyed talking to her. She's very informative and quick to respond. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Some more on the phobias you talk about. Now, ever since I was a kid, I've never cared for clowns very much, and I think that's one of the phobias that has been recognized.
Absolutely. Coulrophobia. You're a coulrophobiac.
What is it called?
Coulrophobia. COULRA phobia. Coulrophobia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know the new name for you, Rob. Coulrophobia.
Coulrophobia.
And before you go into it, let me explain. And then we moved to Wellington here, and one of the first things we find out is there was a clown murderer here who was on the loose.
No.
And
are you kidding?
This person came to the woman's door with flowers, and she opened the door, answered, and she handed the clown handed her flowers, and right behind it was a gun, and just shot her and killed her. And that was going on for like 30 years. They finally
made into a television. I just saw something.
It may have been.
It may have been I know it's probably been a documentary because it's such a strange case, and it was a cold case for a long time here in Wellington, and it was another woman who was involved.
I think she was having an affair with the woman's husband too. That was the motive.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'll say this. That's the
anyhow. So that was kind of funny moving here, and then
that's not funny. That's not funny. That's really creepy. Well, look, as I dug into, I'm calling them strange phobias that could, and I have to stress, could be linked in some cases to what we call abduction or contact. You have to take into account that there could be so many different, so much impetus for where these phobias are coming from, not the least of which is this, this attachment to clowns being creepy. I mean, they can be creepy. Where did that come from? Why would someone dress up in a clown
Stephen King.
Yes.
Stephen King's book.
Absolutely.
That didn't help.
Well, I did some research on the whole coulrophobia thing, and I'm trying to think of the organization that did the research. I can't because there's been so many, but they cited, kind of loosely associating clowns with surprise and unpredictability. A clown popping out of a box, a Jack in the Box sort of thing. As a child, that might startle or frighten you. I mean, that's kind of a very, very simplistic look. But my idea is, well, let me go back a little bit, because each phobia, I think, has a different entry point. As far as coulrophobia is concerned, and I'm going to give credit to Mary Rodwell, who's a fellow researcher in this field and regression therapist. She's fabulous. And it was she who brought this to my attention, as she has regressed probably about 1,000 or more people at this point. And in one or more cases, she has had individuals under regression who believe that they may have had contact, but in the initial regression, they believe themselves, as an example, as they're describing what is a being, they describe them as a clown. I see big, the crazy shoes that they wear. I see a big red nose. I see the purple hair, whatever. And in one particular case that I cite, she regressed someone who I think had a motorcycle accident, But there was a point of missing time which he felt something else may have happened, and she regressed him. And he was one that described, okay, she said, well, okay, what are you seeing now? I see clown shoes. She says, look a little closer. She had a feeling that was not really what he was seeing. And invariably he described, let's just say, what looked to be a gray. Now she has come up with the term, or she has used the term screen memory as a possible thing that happens to some experiencers, that we don't know who's doing the screening. Is it the being themselves that's screening to keep the calm of the contactee? Is it our own brain that is so intelligent that it knows how, just like with trauma, it knows how to shut I mean, think about what some of these beings are said to look like, something that many of us wouldn't even be able to process. And so could it be our own brains that's masking into something that's a little bit more familiar? But in the unconscious experiencer, they will not be aware of their contact, but instead be freaking totally afraid of clowns. So they'll never get to the root of what that was. They're not really afraid of the clown, but the clown, because it wasn't a clown, it may have been a being. So that's really sort of the entry point I go into there. But there are other phobias. If you want, Rob, I can talk about those that I look at.
Yeah. First, let's the screen memory thing is interesting.
Well, John Mack talks about that, and so does Whitley.
Yes, Whitley has talked about screen memory.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, Trish, about the story that Deborah told us.
Which one?
Okay, so she has been abducted a number of times, and one of these experiences was after she had gone to a Guns N' Roses concert, and when she was taken aboard, who does she see in the craft but Axl Rose? And she points at him and says, "What's he doing here?" And the answer telepathically to her was, "Oh, we thought you liked him." And then the being turned into a gray.
Yeah. Why do I feel like, Rob, you told me that story before? Somebody, maybe it was a show.
Well, it's in Aliens in the Backyard.
That's
that's probably why.
Well, the screen memory phenomenon is something that is also quite common in the abduction syndrome. The question I have is, who's doing the screening? Is it coming from the being themselves? When in the case that you just told of the Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose, they were able to sort of shapeshift, an entity into, a popular, pop star or whatever. So and yet I don't underestimate our own capacity to sort of morph what the brain does not want to see, or the conscious mind can't handle, into something else. I mean, let's look at the dreamscape, of which you guys are intimately familiar with. You've written about it so much, and how metaphorical dreams can be, where many times messages are masked as something that knows how to get our attention, and yet it may not be that. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's a scenario or a person even. So, I give ourselves a lot of credit for having that ability to screen what we don't need to see at the time. And maybe it's a cooperation between the being and us. But either way, I
maybe so.
Yeah.
You mentioned this man who was healed by aliens. I mean, we've heard this from Preston too. Tell us about that. You don't have to say his name if you don't want to.
No, I can, because he's talked about it publicly. I sure can.
Oh, okay.
Reverend Michael J.S. Carter. He happens to be a regular on Ancient Aliens, as a matter of fact, and he's done some stellar work. He's a best-selling author. He's written about aliens in the Bible, but he is also an experiencer. He doesn't really talk about it that much on Ancient Aliens, but Michael tells a story, and I think he may have written about it, in which he had a pretty serious blood clot situation. I don't know in which leg, but it got so intense that he said his leg blew up like LeBron James, and he was driving and he just noticed his leg had literally just blown up. So of course he went to the doctor. The doctor says, you need intervention immediately. And they prepared to do whatever procedure they were going to do. But in the interim, now he had experiences prior to, he's been having them probably most of his life, but I don't know if I'm going to get all the details right, but he said to have was visited by a being. I'd like to describe the being, but I can't quite remember whether it was a blue being, a very odd looking creature, not a gray. I know that. Very large, very almost Hulk-like, muscular, came into his bedroom, and he saw a blue beam come out of the being and into his abdomen, I believe.
Wow.
Michael, if you're listening, I hope I'm getting it right. But the gist of it is the next morning, the blood clot was gone. His leg was back to normal. He went to the doctor. The doctor obviously was confounded and said, it's gone. He believes that, as a matter of fact, I can send you guys a link to where he talks about it, where I interviewed him.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
I'd love to see
Well,
that.
we have the conversation. He says, those beings hooked me up. They hooked him up. They healed him. They healed him. So yeah, there are those accounts, but like you and I were talking, Trish, why isn't this for everyone? You know,
I know.
why can't we call them on demand, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And they sometimes apparently don't want to or are unable to heal everything, because remember Deborah's story about that, Trish,
some things are genetic.
Right. She had trouble walking upstairs because of her knee, and they said, well, we can take care of that, and they healed her knee. But then she has this
it's an underlying immunity condition, I think.
Yeah, and they said that's genetic. That's genetic, or that's we can't deal with that.
Yeah.
Maybe they feel that, you know, the prime, what's it called, prime directive or a prime directive, or not interference. You know,
that she was supposed to deal with it.
Technology to fix it, but they're not to do that. Who's to say?
You know, I had two experiences, Alexa, that have always perplexed me and delighted me. One was Nancy Picard and I went to an Eric. Oh, we had just read this book by a chiropractor, Eric Pearl, and went to one of his workshops where he was a chiropractor, but he had developed a technique for.
I know Eric Pearl. Yeah, I know his work.
Okay.
The reconnection. Okay. It's called the reconnection.
The reconnection. That's it. And so during the session, I was paired up with a woman I didn't know, and she started working on me. And all of a sudden, at the top of my head, I saw that there was a beam of light that went out of the top of my head through the ceiling. And at the top, I saw 3 little alien faces peering down, just kind of watching.
Really?
And like they were curious about what was going on. Now, they came back one other time in 2005 during one of the hurricanes. I was laying in bed thinking, oh my God, my house. No, I don't know. No, it wasn't Katrina. We didn't get Katrina.
No?
Francis. No.
Okay.
That was Louisiana.
Right.
And I was laying there thinking, oh my God, the house is going to blow away. And then all of a sudden I just fell asleep and I saw that. And no, I suddenly saw them again. And it was like very calming. And I immediately fell asleep, woke up the next morning, the hurricane was gone.
Wow.
So I'm wondering if
You're a witness
on these. Yeah. I mean, to something, you know.
Call on
I felt they were. I'm going to.
Well,
I got an ankle you can heal.
Absolutely. Put it out there and look. We tend to want to put, you know, these experiences and these entities in nice, neat little scenario baskets. The angels are this, and the, you know, orbs are this, and demons are this, and shadow people are this, and aliens are this. There's something connected to, there's some commonality between all of them, whether it is their spiritual acuity, or their spiritual acuity, their technological acuity. There's something that they know that we don't, that they use that we don't. And call on, who was I listening to just the other day that said, when I am looking for guidance, I call on whoever is listening that is available for my highest good. It may be the archangels. It could be, you know, God itself, whatever. I don't even know that it matters. And it may actually do us injustice when we have a specific, no, it has to be Archangel Michael. If we're being watched and looked over by all different kinds of beings, call on that which is suited to you and suited to your needs. Bottom line is you're open to it. You're already.
I am.
Yeah. And not only are you open to it, but I mean, you have experiences, both you and Rob. My God. Unbelievable. Just
so Alexis, people who have these phobias, and there are some strange phobias that you talk about, like phobia of sunflower seed,
Yes.
sunflower plants, which seems pretty odd. How are they associated? Can they be associated with experiencer contacts? I mean, what's the connection? Because
Okay.
people can have phobias without the experiencer contact.
Oh,
well,
there's no
right?
well, I make that very clear that in
yeah.
many cases it could have nothing to do with it. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
there could be some link. Well, as far as helianthrophobia, which is, believe it or not, a bona fide phobia, a fear of sunflowers. What started me on this
so
track what started me on this track is a dear friend of mine, my best friend, as a matter of fact, who told me that she had a fear of sunflowers. I said, what do you mean a fear? She said, well, as an example, a friend of mine one day brought me as a house gift, bouquet of sunflowers. And I almost lost it. I mean, she was, she didn't want to hurt her feelings, but she has an utter fear of sunflowers. Now, I happen to know that this individual also has had a ton of, encounters of different kinds throughout her life. I also believe she has a lineage of this. And as I looked into this, I thought, my goodness, when you look at a sunflower's construction, particularly the ones that are large, some of them can be over a foot long in diameter. Yeah. What do you see? You see almost like this black eye, often associated or could be associated with the big round eyes of a gray. As an example, and other species that have been described as having really, really dark, almost like saucer eyes. And also, when you look at the circumference of the sunflower, it could resemble craft itself. Yeah, now, here's the interesting thing. I don't take these things in isolation, and I'm not making the proclamation that they are absolutely connected to contact. I'm saying it's curious. Here's the other curious thing. My friend, and then I looked it up, by the way, helianthrophobia is quite common. More common than we know. Helianthrophobia, fear of sunflowers.
Strange, yeah.
She also has an utter fear of satellites.
Oh, wow.
And a fear of clowns.
Okay. So, knowing that your phobia is alien related, is that a better situation or a worse?
Knowing versus not knowing? It depends on the person, I would say.
Right.
Well, as an example, I said to my friend, have you considered the idea that you may have had some contact encounters? And she says, I have indeed. She's also had several OBEs. She's had a whole litany of things that have happened. Look, whenever I'm looking at a case or a set of cases, you can't look at anything. You guys know as researchers, you can't take anything in isolation. You have to look at a collection of things. You have to take timing into account, association, lineage as an example, intergenerational link possibly into account. You bring together a whole basketful, if you will, of things that, to the point where you can't ignore it and say, there's got to be something going on here.
Yeah. You're looking for a pattern.
They're patterns. There's no question that they're patterns. But what's so difficult with really trying to get to the bottom of the contact, phenomenon, the abduction syndrome, and the fact that we may be living amongst these beings and they amongst us. What makes it so difficult is when you're taking a scientific approach, the first thing that they're looking for is to replicate. You've got to do controlled experiments. It's just not that protocol is not going to be applicable here. It's going to be based on anecdote and commonalities within those anecdotes among a whole set of other very stringent criteria. So in doing this research for me, again, I always say the disclaimer, there's no way I'm ever going to say definitively, this is definitely what's going on. I do think it's definitely worth exploring, though. Yeah.
I don't think that you can many scientists dismiss anecdotal evidence as irrelevant.
Oh, most do.
But and it's ridiculous because that's where you start,
Well, here's where quantum theory becomes sort of the hero in all of this, not necessarily as it relates to contact, but let's just take something like ESP or mind over matter, which is a part of the whole ESP phenomenon. What they're finding, and you guys know this, when examining the behavior of subatomic particles, they're finding at a micro level that behavior is mimicking some of the things that could make something like a mind over matter psychokinesis possible. So quantum theory in some cases has helped to proliferate that conversation to say, hey, this could be, if it's possible on a micro level, it could be possible on a macro level. Remote viewing is another example, non-local communication or being able to see non-locally. There have been many experiments done from a quantum perspective that have shown non-local connection between subatomic particles. So that's the only, us humans, we need that proof. At least we have that's kind of breaking that glass ceiling a little bit, I think.
J.B. Ryan, when he started his research at Duke, he started based on anecdotal evidence.
Sure. Yeah.
That's how it starts.
It always starts with anecdote because people tell stories and the scientific mind says, okay, let's see if we can meet this out and come up with some evidence to support it. Yeah. The Ryan Institute is amazing.
What about hypnotic regressions? That's another thing that's been scientists have suggested it's there.
Well, John Mack used it.
Yeah, but there's also the suggestion that the regressor is looking for.
Absolutely. Well, not all regression is created equal, and there's a lot of controversy in terms of that's like saying, a legitimate hypnotist, are they offering suggestion, or are they planting the suggestion in asking the leading questions? And, it's interesting you bring that up, Rob, because the late Bud Hopkins, who I know knew his work, a lot of people, he had his issues and he had his detractors, but a lot of people appreciated the fact that he wasn't leading in his approach, where others, and I can't call any offhand, but some others will ask questions that might lead the patient or the client down a road that would instigate or perturb an answer that could or may not be accurate. So, I know, look, the hardened scientist is going to say, poo-poo hypnotherapy, poo-poo all of that. And John Mack got hella grief for daring to go down that rabbit hole while at Harvard. God bless him and his courage there. I'm actually in touch with she's actually a member of my Higher Journeys community who was regressed repeatedly by John Mack. I'm not going to mention her name because she actually gave me a tape of one of their sessions.
Oh, fantastic.
That I have. She trusted me and gave me that tape. It's probably a good hour, two of them, I think, a good 1.5 to 2 hours long, of John Mack in his voice, regressing her as a young woman. Wow. I have that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Quite fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, he was great.
Have you heard any examples of people with these phobias being regressed and coming up with
people with the phobias?
People with phobias being regressed.
Well, off the bat, no, but I can say that to my dear friend who, I approached her and said, would you be willing to be regressed? Because I think you've got something happening here, not just the sunflower thing, the whole collection of features that is her life. She said, yeah. So the question is, should you be regressed if you're having phobias? Look, I don't think it's for everyone. I don't know that individuals that have these phobias, many of them don't even want to know what the origin of it is. And they may find it's something completely different. But that's a good question, Rob. Let me think about that in terms of people that have had phobias. I do go into, I interviewed quite a few people for my presentation. And one individual who is an experiencer tells the story of going to a Halloween party in which he wore an alien mask. This is many years ago. Goes to the party. He's wearing an alien mask. And he said the response that he got from people ranged from people running away from him, questioning why he was wearing that, and even a few stories. This is a Halloween party of regular people. Several people took him aside and said, the reason why this is creeping me out is because I think I've had contact
Yeah.
So, triggers is another thing. People having triggers and the things that may be triggering them where they're not looking for it, but they're having these. It's kind of like remembering a dream. All of a sudden, out of the blue, somebody might say one word and it will open up the floodgates of recall. That's happening, I think, a lot with people as well.
Yeah.
Recently.
We had a friend of ours who was hypnotized
I was just thinking
by Berthold Schwartz, who's deceased now. He was up in Vero Beach, Florida, and I took him up there and went through this whole experience with him, and he just broke down. And what his experience was that he was going to a Halloween party, and he was dressed as a pirate, and his buddy was dressed as a clown, and they were abducted. And what happened is there was a number of people who were abducted, and they're all waiting in line outside this craft. And here's this guy dressed as a clown, and another guy as a pirate waiting in line, and all these other people, they're just standing there, not reacting at all to the to the appearance of the other these two guys in the line. So they're all, something has happened to all of them, and they're being taken aboard this craft. And he goes into detail about seeing writing on the wall in this craft, and he would it was really fascinating.
That was fascinating.
Very, very
that
traumatic.
is fascinating. Absolutely. Well, that reminds me of a book that I also mentioned in the lecture. I don't know if you've heard of the book called Connections by Anna Jamerson. I believe that was actually a pseudonym. She did not want to put her real name out at the time. It was co-written by the name that was used was Beth something. I think Beth Collins. Connections. It's not an easy to find book. It's been out for quite a while, but I used that book as part of my research for the lecture when I first did it. And what she, among other things, this is really about their journey into finding out. They suspected that they were having contact encounters after they met. I believe one of them owned a ranch or a horse farm, and the other came to work at the farm. And through their getting to know each other, they had a feeling that there was a connection between the two of them that they couldn't quite figure out. Well, this led them down a literal rabbit hole of finding out that not only were they having contact encounters where they were on board craft together, but Anna Jamerson tells about being on board a craft one time and seeing 200 to 300 other human beings on the craft, several of which she recognized, like her veterinarian, a coworker, a student from high school that she had known. So this phenomenon of, again, going back to how common is contact, and there are scores of people that are completely not aware of having contact encounters, and yet through these handful of individuals that are having recall of their own choice, find out that they're running into hundreds of people that they know while on board craft. And that reminds me of the story you told, Rob.
Right. Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to have to play the part of Nigel, because I think Nigel's internal clock is off today, because we're a little over.
You know why?
What's
it's
that?
raining. It's raining, and he knows that means he can't go to the park.
It's raining here too.
And I mean, I think if and Alexis, if you've got time, we'll keep going. But I think you guys could talk all day.
Right?
We could, and we do, and we have. No, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go because I've got to get ready to do this presentation. But it's been really great.
Yeah, I have one final question. One final question. Are you aware of any abduction experiences in the last 5 years?
Oh, absolutely.
You have? Okay. That's interesting. Because
one of the things one of the things Whitley told us was that he didn't think abductions were happening. This was
and same with Dolly said this. Dolly said the same thing, that they're not happening anymore.
There's a split on opinion of that. I mean, I personally have talked to individuals, never mind within the last 5 years, but within the last year, who are telling me of their the contact. I don't want to say abduction. Let's just call it loosely contact encounters.
Right.
I'm not going to argue as to whether they're happening more or not. I think some of it could be just recall of experiences, but yes,
Yeah.
I do believe they're still happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something's happening.
Thought
Yeah.
so too.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you
Hmm.
very much.
Thank you.
Wow, Alexis. We'll send, and it's going up tonight, right, John?
It is
John?
correct.
Okay.
That's true.
Great.
Yep.
So we'll send you the link.
Sounds good.
And so
Alexis,
contact.
you and I need to meet soon.
Are we still on the record here or no?
Yeah, we're still recording because I
Oh,
want to
that's
mention
okay.
Contact in the Desert.
Oh, okay.
June
I can't
2nd,
swear. I'm kidding.
June 2nd through 4th. And Alexis, do you know do you have more than one? What's your schedule as far as?
On Friday, June 2nd, I will be doing Unconscious Contact. Are you an experiencer and don't know it? That's supposed to be a fairly well-attended lecture. And then on Sunday, I will be doing a really fun, well, I say fun, it'll be interactive, a workshop called Between Two Worlds, how to integrate your contact into day-to-day life. We're going to be dealing with the problem and solution. Problem being people not being able to reconcile having these encounters and having to go to work the next day and act like everything's fine and dandy.
Right.
That's a big issue. So I've actually developed a protocol where I'll be doing it. It's not a meditation. It's more of an exercise that will help strengthen your ability to have a foot planted in two worlds and still be able to function.
Right.
So
Huh.
that's on Sunday. That's on the 4th.
Sounds good.
And then I'll have
Yeah.
a booth there and I'll be saying hi to some folks that I'm looking forward to seeing. So
Okay,
And
great.
give us
Yep.
your website info too, so we can have that on here.
higherjourneys.com is where you can find me online. And of course, my YouTube channel, Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. So yeah. And
All
the
right.
proof is out there. Yay, the
Right.
proof is out there. Right, on the
Okay.
History Channel.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks,
Right.
guys.
Okay.
Talk to